Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. I'm sitting here with the rather wonderful, and please excuse my pronunciation, Emre Ramazanoglu. We have been chatting a little bit without the camera rolling, and I've got to be honest, it's been an absolute blast getting to know you.
Oh, brilliant, man.
And I love your sensibilities and the music that you... I think it's because, at least in my humble estimation, is because you are a musician.
Oh, that was first.
First and foremost.
Yeah, always have just been a drummer.
Where did you start?
I've just been really weird, but I moved to London maybe 1999 or something as an odd selection of kind of programming stuff, which was a very unwise thing with the people I was doing that with, but then also playing. And I met Andy Gangadin very early on, who's an incredible session drummer and still is an incredible session drummer and great person. And he was doing the Spice Girls, which is probably the biggest gig in the world at that point.
Oh, gorgeous.
And he had his kit set up in the studio. He said, come down and hang out. He said, go on, play a bit. And I was a bit, well, I played a bit. And he's like, yeah, you should definitely not be a session drummer. And I was like, oh, okay. And he went, no, you play great. It's just, that's a terrible career path. Don't do it. Just don't do it. You could do it. Don't do it. And then he came to loads of my gigs and was really supportive. He was lovely. Just don't do it. And I listened to him and I was like, okay. He said, the artist's fallen out of this. This is not a career to have. It's not, you don't do it. He was so clear. And he said, you do this other thing, do that. So it's pretty good advice, I think.
But you still do sessions?
I still do sessions, yeah. I've always done them, but that's not that.
But you blended it with this side of the glass.
And it was just the most incredible advice. Yeah, I ended up doing amazing drum sessions, incredible drum sessions. So it's been wonderful, but that's like always had, I think he knew we'd chatted enough about doing the studio, which is what I loved. You know? So yeah, it was interesting, very interesting.
Well, first of all, you're in a great part of London.
Yeah, it's lovely here.
Oh,
yeah.
I love this part. And this building, Amar and I were talking about it outside. Yeah. It's, I don't know how old it is. I presume it's 1800s?
It's really old. It's really old.
Even older, 1700s?
I think it's like super, super old. I can't remember. Yeah. I've been told a few times it just disappears out into the unused knowledge. Yeah. But there's been a studio here for a really long time. But it used to be the stables for the fire department, I think. Oh. So these are all stables. I think maybe
we're trying to figure out what all those doors were. Now it makes perfect sense.
All stables for a really, really long time. And then it was Edwin Collins' studio for a really long time. And then it's gutted and turned into this. So, yeah.
Incredible. And I love your room. And I've made this point many, many times. There was like a lot of these photos of show us your studio online. And there were always like these really pristine, perfect studios. And the only thing it says to me is like, it's a shame you're not working. Because my studio, everyone used to say, it's such a mess. And like, what are you doing? I'm like, I just did a vocal session, retracked, an acoustic guitar, did some writing and recorded a mix today.
This is it.
And this is what this looks like.
It's hilarious. I've just come back from 6 days of tracking. Half my gear is unplugged and wrapped over here. And I've finished some drums the other day. And it's a remote recording device with this Atmos mic, which is over here. And it's just like, there's just so many things going on at the same time.
I think it's really paradise. I love it.
I mean, it's fun and free diffusion. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's
kind of.
So first of all, it's your mix room. You've got your stereo speakers. Tell us a little bit about these because I've never heard of them until today.
Yeah, it's a company called Geitine, Microelectric Geitine. I think it's a German company. I think they're originally for outside broadcast, and they're like surprisingly full range for tiny little speakers. Super, it's kind of musical and accurate, I would say, for me.
Wow.
I love them.
Are you able to explain anything about them? It's
dual concentric, but it's slightly offset, top ported. So the bass
very unusual.
Is really unusual, but it means the bass response is just sort of, it all pushes forward in quite an unusually useful way. They don't change at all as you go up in level, nothing. At super low level, full range. As loud as they go, full range. They're pretty loud, which is sort of, I mix pretty quietly to be honest, but sometimes I need it. They pair well with the sub. And most importantly, it's not a big change the way the Genelecs are corrected in here. It's not a huge change going across, generally in the mid-range, so a quite happy pairing. I mean, to be honest, I could mix happily in stereo on the Genelec.
Are you using the Dangerous?
This is my monitor for stereo, but for Atmos, I'm not. I'm just using GLM. Sorry, I don't need anything more than that. Well, I do need quite a few things more than that, but this is totally functional for me because it just does it in the speaker. It's like as transparent as you could want, really.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's an incredible system for a small room like this. I don't know how I'd do better. And translation is insane because I get to hear these everywhere. So this is awesome. I really didn't think we could do it in a small room, but it was the first small room that Genelec did, I think. And it's been a sort of test room, I think, a little bit.
I think it's phenomenal. I mean, I say that because we've listened.
Yeah. Oh, bless you.
It sounds absolutely amazing.
It's pretty nuts when you go to some of the more modern music as well with more concentrated level. It's insane how well it hangs together in here. I'm like, okay, thank you very much. Genelec for an unbelievable rig. It really is. And it's crossed over into, I never thought I'd move away from guide times at all to do stereo work, but I'm now, because I can route my system a number of ways quickly, and I'm using the Genelecs more and more for mastering.
Oh, for mastering.
Yeah.
So when you're working in Immersive in Atmos, is it completed to you, or are you giving it to a mastering engineer to do any touch-ups?
For me, there really shouldn't be any Atmos mastering. It's a post-mastering process for almost all Atmos mixes, unless, and this is just my own grumpy opinion, the artist is with me, or at least the mixer or producer is with me, making some decisions. Otherwise, they're out of the loop on 99% of mixes I do. It's label commissioned, A&R approved. So I get all my work, which is, we're approaching, I think, 2,000 Atmos mixes now, I think, tracks. It's because I respect the artist's and producer's vision as my primary function doing an Atmos mix, not to make an exciting Dolby advert. That's not what I'm doing. Unless it's with the artist, in which case, let's do the most interesting creative thing you want, if you want that. Or we could do the immersive version of the stereo, which is what I mainly get asked to do. So what I do first is have the mix stems. It's mainly from mix stems, which, depending on the experience of the producer, are either pre-mix stems, where everything's been taken off and you have to recreate the mix, and then recreate, which is just usually recreating mix bus and then recreate it. Or more experienced mixes, you'll get pre-master stems, which basically pretty much equal the pre-mix. And then I will master, and then I have the master in stereo, and I will null it until all I'm hearing is modulating elements and distortion from the mastering. And that's as close I can get, unless it's been mastered analog or on tape or something where I'm just going to chase it, the whole time. Or if there's some kind of time-based element in the mastering, I'm not going to be able to match that. But I get as close as I possibly can within 0.1 dB, and then I do the Atmos. So I'm creating Atmos from a completely functioning mastered mix, split up. That's
interesting. That's very smart.
There's no bed at all, because there's no way I have found or heard from anyone else to get coherent headphone mixes that exactly match the balance of the stereo mix when you're exciting multiple binaural states. And there's no way of getting convincing binauralization without mixing binaural states that I've found. So I do not use the bed. You get great Atmos mixes with the bed, very convenient. 10 channel mix bus is very handy. If I have 50 stereo objects, which is not that uncommon, that's 100 channels of mono audio. So that's what my mix bus is. So I'm spreading across that and using a linked mix bus and mastering. Depending, it can get quite heavy, like it pretty heavy DSP sometimes.
I suppose in the back of my mind, I'm wondering whether, if somebody wants you to mix there in the box, mix in Immersive, they should just send you their session.
It'd be a nightmare.
Oh, it'd be a nightmare.
A nightmare. I just want stems with their mix committed, because there's so much. I've just been using a new plugin, which I have to talk about because it's literally unbelievable, by Accenti. It's called Chameleon. Which
don't know it.
It's insane. It's like someone has understood a major problem in Atmos, which is you get sent stems with baked-in ambience. But I want to move that ambience around. I don't want to recreate it, really. I want to take the original vision and make that immersive with just the space. So I want to, if I have a guitar which has got really great reverb that sits perfectly in the mix, I then have to recreate it, which I can do. There's amazing tools. I use Liquid Sonics a lot for this, who do unbelievable.
The fact that you can tune the decay times and different frequencies is life-changing.
Well, and immersively, it's brilliant. It can respond either as a single pulsing unit or it can be discrete. And Altiverb 8, I have to mention, just unbelievable for dialing in immersive rooms and feeling like you're in the middle of it and walking around. It's incredible. But this thing, you feed it the baked-in reverb in a stem, and it goes, "Oh, this is it," and recreates that reverb in immersive instantly.
What's it called again?
This is called Chameleon by Accentize. Absolutely, like I've used it today on 4 channels of the mix, which I never normally use this much reverb in immersive because I don't want to add, but this folds down so well, and this is like an absolute game changer for people doing that kind of stereo conversion.
So it's emulating or removing?
It's emulating. It analyzes it and recreates it with its engine. So smart.
So there's no artifacts and stuff like that.
And it's totally, it's making it. It's a reverb. It's a bit like Pro R2 does, but you have to feed that the impulse. That's amazing as well. But this takes my source material. It's just taken a whole leg of Atmos mixing, just thrown it away. You don't need to do that anymore. This will just do it for you. And I've been not being super anal about listening to the verb. I'm listening in context. I cannot fault this. This is absolutely brilliant for this job. I haven't even thought about it creatively yet. I can imagine this is an amazing tool musically. But for this particular small, well, no, it's not a small bit. It's an important part of the Atmos mix. Oh my God, there's a solution. And it's interesting that people are thinking about, that's a working person who's doing a lot of Atmos mixing is needing that. You would never know you really needed that, I don't think, unless you're doing that. So it's lovely to see decent companies are going, let's make a great tool. There's more that needs to happen. And I think the more people work with objects, it might work out a few more things. We don't necessarily need wide track width plugins that much. I think it's great that they exist, but that's not really what I'm after. There's more link control, and how you link control would be very useful. There's a big problem in Atmos, which isn't, there's a way of working around it, which I can boringly explain, but when you get plugins without sidechains, you can't use them in Atmos. It's not, because you need to be able to key it, because you can't use the program material, you have to key it from a premix. So if it doesn't have one, and an artist I had recently, a really big artist, had 8 to 10 plug-in mix bus, none of which was keyable. So that presents me a huge problem because they didn't run off their masters. They didn't run off their stems through it.
I see.
So I had 60 or 70 stems not through the mix bus. That means I'd have to put 10 plugins on each channel, some of which are UAD, and that's DSP based. And
you're hitting a big...
Yeah.
we talked off camera about some of our bugbears and things that annoy us, and one of my ones is this sort of people encouraging the top-down mixing philosophy. I grew up at a time, and we were similar age, I'm sure you did the same way, that the mix bus was sort of, the least you could do on it was the better. You did the work on the elements, or better still, you recorded them the way you wanted to hear. But now people come up with some multi-band compression and dynamic compressors and phase this and widening that and blah, 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 all going on, limiting compression.
I have a two-pronged approach. Like when I'm working with Ken on the Bowie stuff, for example, there is no mix bar. There's no EQ and there's no compressor. And that's what's on the stereo mixes. The stereo mixes in that record are the Atmos fold down. So they are the Atmos mixes. It didn't need any. His tracking, it was done.
Everything was committed. Yeah.
Everything's committed, but the way you balanced it, I'm quite a fan of a mix bus for some things, but it wasn't necessary. And often in Atmos, you can get away with a hell of a lot less. But I do a lot of top-down mixing, and I understand why, but it's not. But that's for a certain amount of mixes. Other stuff, I almost have no mix bus. Just like you're saying, it depends on the genre
and the recording,
and what's there and what I'm given. And sometimes if I'm doing drum and bass, I'll have quite a heavy top-down mix bus because I don't know any other way to do it.
Because it's got to pump, it's got to move.
And the way it's delivered, there's not much to do in the tracks. You're sort of really almost in these mixes kind of mastering. Really, it's like mastering. I don't know.
Which makes sense when you're using virtual instruments where there is no wolf tones coming from the bass. You're
not correcting stuff. You're not, but you're not also knitting stuff together. It's a weird genre where you're not. Well, if you listen to a premix, people will be absolutely shocked.
This is why it's wonderful for me to talk to you, because very few people understand that there is no one size that fits all.
Yeah,
because they're working. People work in one genre, and they're like, and I get it.
Which I did in some ways. I think it would have been easier, but I have spanned a lot of genres, including score mixing, which I think is why Atmos worked. Because when you're delivering score mixes, or to the composer I work with in LA, the different composers there, and they want stem.
Who are the composers in LA?
I did a lot with David Holmes, actually, which is one of my favourite people.
Yeah.
Favourite people to work with in the world. Just aligned so strongly taste-wise. We just do stuff and it's just this flow. It's lovely. It's a lovely thing.
Well, I've heard you work. I imagine most people would align with you.
Bless you. It's very kind. But there's the re-recording mixer, whose name I can't remember, which is terrible. I'm really apologise. Who does a lot of Soderbergh's movies, that is very prescriptive about what he wants. And so when you deliver stems in this way, it's not stems out of Pro Tools, it's stems that equal your mix. Exactly. Absolutely exactly. And another people I work with, exact stems. These are stems when you press polarity reverse, the mix disappears. It's not like, they're about to say, no, it's the same. So I work without a mix bus when I'm mixing with score. I don't have a mix bus. I have buses with linked processing, just exactly the same as Atmos. So when I moved into it, I was like, I know exactly what to do with this. It's exactly the same workflow. And it is. Getting that mix bus key working, that's a different thing. That's not just, run a sidechain. I mean, you can do that, but it's much more involved. But you to get it really working, you're writing a lot of different things in that mix. But that's a workflow which I understand. And I think that helps with this. And I've done lots of mastering. So you get those things and you go, okay, that's works for Atmos as sort of basic. But it's quite demanding amount of stuff to do to get this all going. And I'm just lucky that I've had that experience and been called to do those things and had to deliver those things under pressure. And that's when you get good at stuff, right? When you get someone kicking
when you're
your
doing
ass.
36 hours of all day, all night, next day, yeah.
Exactly. And then and you go, can I deliver this, please? Well, it's not can I, it's like when I, and there's no, when you get excuse-free work, which is at a high level, there's no excuses. Oh, sorry, I didn't. No, it's like you have to deliver. So that's been, I think there's this pressure on the scene generally, and I'm just diverging into Atmos a little bit here.
It's okay.
It's quite demanding to get it all.
When it's done at the level you're talking about, yes.
Which I think is the basic level for me. I don't think it's like that. I don't think that's not a high level for me. That's like the baseline is exactly matching the stereo or being better minimum. Otherwise,
well,
why
I'm
would
glad
you do
to
it?
hear that.
Why would you do it? Because you don't need it otherwise. Because you've got an amazing stereo mixes, it's come so far.
Well, the unfortunate thing is I'm sure you're going to agree, when Apple first launched Spatial, and I'm sure they were a lovely person. Remember the Marvin Gaye track? Yeah. It was unbearable how badly it was done.
Well,
I know I'm not being very politically correct here,
I mean,
but everybody reacted. And I get it. Marvin Gaye is one of the greatest artists that ever lived, and why not present it? But unfortunately, like you said, it didn't sound good in stereo.
I just think we've had mono to stereo.
Yeah.
Can we just all learn from that?
Yeah.
Because it's just the same thing. It's just, look, no one liked really.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, some of it will stay because it's great music that will persist forever, but a lot of people prefer the mono versions of what we're talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But do we learn from Atmos? Let's just go in doing it nicely because we've had history and we can learn from it. And can we just, even 5.1, can we learn from the 5.1 mistakes, which were plentiful, Let's learn from this. Let's do it. Let's mix this incredible technology, which is mind-blowingly different than 5.1. So more advanced. The fold downs, everything, understanding how it fold down, understanding you can have a portable file if you do it with the right intention, a portable file that could be the stereo and the Atmos, and even technically you can go up to cinematic when that's sorted out a bit more. But that's pretty exciting because it can be, potentially you can do it all with the right approach. It's not like insane technical skill, it's just the right approach and like understanding that there's no excuses. You can do it. It can be done. So you just have to push it a little more and you can get to the same place as area was. I'm not saying that's always what you do. I did a lot of stuff with, very fortunate to do stuff with Brian Eno. That was the last thing we did. I mean, it was a great, if I can, this sounds a bit hornblowy, but it was good fun and very interesting for me. I got asked to speculatively do 2 of his tracks. Would you have a go at 2? Yes, absolutely.
Of course, Brian Eno.
So I did my kind of thing where I was respectfully listening to the stereo mix and making it fully. I went quite like immersive as I possibly could and made it wrap around you. But it's a stereo mix still, folded down perfectly to the stereo. It was and I got a call saying, "Are you free now?" And I was like, "Well, I've kind of I'm going to be about 10 minutes or so. But can Brian come to the studio? He's heard the mixes and wants to come." And I was like, yes.
He came here.
Yeah, he was like, brilliant. So
lovely.
He turns up, sits down, he goes, yes, well, I've listened to what you did. Absolutely, it's really, really good. We're just going to change absolutely everything. I was like, oh my God.
Right, but that makes sense to me. He's basically saying, I know you can do what I need.
I think so.
You've proven yourself. Now I want to experiment and have some fun. Because it's Brian Eno.
Yeah, and he sat down and he did the most. It was just educational. Everything I've ever done with him, every time I meet him, every time I work with him, is colossally educational. Like, he's really profoundly special. But he just did these, to do this, fold all the bass up, all of it, smaller, put it in the back. I was like, okay. And then everything it wasn't random. It wasn't just messing around. And then there was this incredible immersive thing. I was like, oh my God. Could you just do that to the rest of the record? And then he let me do it. He didn't. That was it. I did the whole record, and he did come back in, and we made 4 small changes because he explained so clearly what he wanted. He was so articulate, and he just, and then I did 10 more albums, I think, which is
amazing,
wild, because that was from multi-track, and that was absolutely mad, because you're talking about recording, like 1974. So these multi-tracks come in, and I start with Another Green World. I go, right, this is brilliant. And it's 10 minutes of multi-track, and the track's a minute and a half. And you go, and then I press play, and I wasn't sure it was the track. And I was like, oh my God, this is the antithesis of mix it and commit everything and put up the faders at 0, and it's the mix. This is commit it, put it on the track, press play, and I couldn't tell you what some of the tracks were. Absolutely not. It's the most creative, genius mixing I've ever experienced, I think, because I've had to reverse engineer it. So I've seen one of the tracks called Becalmed was very sped down, like 40%. I don't even know how they did it then. And then it's just edit. It's 10 minutes of track and 3 minutes of actual tune. And the tape edit, some of them had 10 tape edits in them. I had to go and find and remake and vary speed and make, and then you get it into the right bit. And then you realise that one of them wasn't right. One of them, the ship, it's notes on the fader, like the 10cc thing, where you're
not in love, yeah.
Yeah, but it's all the chords. So it's fader moves to make the chords. I'm hearing the harmony going, God. And one, I got it, which was not, it took a couple of days, I think, that one. And then I was going, there's just a note missing. And it's just not on the multi-track. And it has to be, because I talked to Rhett Davies, who'd done it, and he was certain they hadn't played anything extra in.
So maybe it had gone through an eventide or something?
No, they had an AMS 1.
AMS, right?
2 1176s, 2 Pulse X, that's all they had.
Wow.
And the Helios. But that was very educational for the Helios UAD, which I would say was absolutely identical.
Nice, good job, UAD.
Unbelievable, because I was driving. All the fuzz controls were extra driven on the console, and it was just exactly the same. The tone controls were exactly the same. It's unbelievable. But this note was missing. I was like, well, he didn't play it in. And then I heard, and it was filtering. And I was like, put the resonance up on the Moog, and he'd found just for a note he'd added in. It was just that detective puzzle. I had 6 months to do it, so it was incredible. I could just go in, and there's a detective puzzle of tape going, it is on the tape somewhere. If it's on there, that's it. There was a weird synth that was oscillating. I couldn't work out what it was. I thought it might be a synthy. I was trying to find out all these synths. It was going, boop, 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 boop. And my friend came in. He's a great engineer called Tristan Norwell, who now runs incredible post-production facilities. And he sat down and went, that's a delay. And I was like, what?
Just a changing delay.
Brilliant. Just modulating.
Modulating delay, yeah.
And I couldn't find anything. H delay. Like one of the oldest kind of things, it just did it. It was just there was this.
Was it the AMS?
Rhett didn't know.
Oh, Rhett didn't know.
It might have been a pedal that someone had or something, but it wasn't a bit of hardware. They didn't have anything, so it was just something. It was amazing. That was an incredible learning experience of going. I mixed it left side at a time, then right side at a time.
And with all the learning, it sparks off your own creativity.
It changed everything. There's been a few things. There's been other amazing moments. Incredible genius of Brian, like listening to things, and he was combining this thing he had where he can combine all his tracks and play any combination of anything at any time. At least some mystery to it, but changed one thing and it didn't sound good, and everything had sounded good to that point. And I was like, oh, and everyone in the room was like, oh, it doesn't sound good. And he was going, wait, there's a lesson here, literally saying this. And then we talked for 10 minutes, and then suddenly it sounded good. And I just noticed it again. The track sounds good. He goes, yeah. We just weren't used to it. And I've changed everything. all I'm listening to mixing and everything, I wait a bit longer now and go, maybe it's good. It is good. I just wasn't used to it.
It's weird because
brilliant.
I don't know if we're on exactly the same wavelength yet. So we just got back from New York 2 days ago, and I was asked by Odyssey, we were talking about earlier, to interview somebody on their little stage. Yeah. So Jack Douglas is an old friend of mine. So I bring up Jack Douglas, and he was mentored by Phil Ramone, but Roy Cicala as well. I don't know if you're a Roy Cicala fan. His records are phenomenal. But at the time, they weren't well received. But if you listen to John Lennon Mind Games now, it is mind-blowingly good and crazy and insane with delays and reverbs and stuff feeding into each other. Yeah. At the time, and I remember being a kid, actually just after Lennon had died, and like going back as a little kid and listening to all the Beatles stuff, coming up to Mind Games going, oh no, I don't. Now I listen to it and I'm like, exactly what you're saying. Just like giving it time going, this just sounds phenomenal. That they committed to the art of the process. Yeah.
There's so much of that in Mind Games is pretty good, isn't it? Generally listening to mixes can be absolute mind games. What you think it is and what it actually is can be.
Well, Jack made the point of like, the vocals are so drenched in delays and reverbs, as is everything else. In theory, it should just be an absolute muddle of everything. He said, but you can clearly hear every single vocal and you know exactly what he's saying.
So that's amazing.
Goodness knows what. But he said Roy had a rack that was called Roy's Rack. And he said nobody else knew how to work it. There was just loads of EQs and compressors, some of it hodgepodge together.
Brilliant.
There was probably all kinds of weird ducking going on and everything. But anyway,
it's what we make, isn't it?
But it's that same kinds of personality. I mean, obviously he knows.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to experience that and to have it relevant and then to take it away and go, oh, this is fascinating. And it's a very nice person to do stuff to. And we're mixing something he'd done live, and I don't think he likes playing live much. And it was challenging, and the playback didn't go very well because I'm not sure it was what I'd done or it was just, it wasn't the right feeling. So I just decided to go, you know what, we don't get to sit here with Brian Edwards. So I absolutely went for it and really did something quite full on. And then he liked it because he wanted to see something interesting. And you don't get that much. I want to see something interesting. That's all I want. I want something interesting that moves me. Because he's always got the human side there, which is, it's not just being mad. It's not just going and creativity for creativity's sake. It's I want to feel the connection more than I do. And that's amazing motivation for doing music, right? It's like, I want to feel the connection and emotion in this music. Because that's easy to get lost in that, especially now with all outboard available in ways we've never imagined before. And then 10 times that in terms of processing in the box in a way that, as someone who's always been like very like on the edge of everything, even now I'm going, there's too much.
Oh, it's insane.
It's insane.
You remember when we first started working and you'd get on a console and they'd have maybe 6 auxiliaries.
Yeah.
And maybe 3 reverbs, 2 delays and some modulation device, and you could access them.
That's my AAX folder. 3,453.
It's insane.
And that's just to keep up because I get a session in and I need to be able to open it.
Yeah, we used to decide like, well, if this is our vocal reverb, what are we going to use for the backgrounds? Yeah. Maybe we fill a little bit, the choices we used to make.
Well, now because of delivering stems, I have a system in tools where I can run off the entire mix in one pass, but everything's discrete, and that never used to necessarily be the way. And that presents, I'm aware of that all the time because everything is discrete from everything else because that's one way of doing this thing, and practically it seems to work.
So when you're mixing immersive, are you using any hardware inserts?
No, absolutely. God, no.
Keep it all in the box.
I'm not using any hardware ever in the box, ever. My turnover is just too high. And particularly with Acoustica, I don't need to. I'm absolutely happy.
Now, Acoustica is, I've used many of their plugins and reviewed many of them. They're always some of the best sounding plugins, but they tend to be a bit of a resource hog. Have you?
Oh, I have, my computer is a product of using Acoustica. Basically, they've cost me a lot of extra cash in drive space, in memory, and in processor.
How many gigs of RAM do you have?
192, I think, which is, and the most maxed out system. And then that's okay. It's much better now than it used to be. But I got hooked on what I'm doing. Some mixes, you might not even appreciate what it's doing, or it can be counterintuitive. And I love you, Acoustica, deeply, but the graphical side of things takes a while to get used to. Lag, loading input responses, all kinds of. The newer ones, they're dealing with it all the time, and it's improving in a way that you can never imagine. But having used it for years now, I don't care about any of that because the sound was the end, and it did stuff that nothing else did for me that I wanted. When I could switch away from using my actual hardware and feel no difference, I was like, oh God, I've never had that before. There's always been amazing plugins that I really like, and several companies do incredible stuff. But this was a consistent level of kind of like not rightness that I liked. It's not perfect. It's more like the gear that I'm used to, in fundamentally a bit more like that. And so I really enjoyed that for that usage. Now I use loads of other plugins, but for emulating some of the gear they did, that was my choice generally. So I did that. But for other stuff, and like, there's so many choices. It's just absolutely insanely mind-blowing now. But Atmos-wise, my plugin usage is small in terms of what I'm using because I'm generally working on finished material.
Because people are sending you processed stems.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in Ken's case, stuff that he produced and engineered, so he committed it.
I mean, I wish everyone could sit down and just listen to Ken Scott multitracks, because you just have to go, okay.
I've got to say this, and for anybody who's got this far into the video, I get so much chatter about going, you know, the kids today don't understand. Nobody used to compress an EQ like they. It's like, I've worked with Jack Douglas and Shelley Yakos and Jamie Messina, the guys that made all the records that people love, and obviously Ken. And everything they do, you pull up on fader, it's compressed, EQ'd, and the dynamics are completely restricted and sit exactly where they're supposed to sit. I don't know what people are talking about.
I had a lovely moment with Ken. We got on very well, and he knew that I really like. I didn't know he'd done them, Mahavishnu Orchestra records and Billy Cobham, and so I had no idea he'd done them.
I don't know. I grew up on those records too.
Yeah, and so that was
makes perfect sense when you realise, because
exactly.
You're like, those are the crossover albums, School Days, Birds of Fire. Those are the records as a rock guy that you fall in love with, and they're like a gateway drug into jazz.
Yeah, which is heavily where, you know, I still work a lot in. And he just came down and said, stop working. I was like, oh, what have I done? It's about 4 or 5 days in. He said, stop working. I was like, oh no, I thought it was going well. He went, just stop. Put this on, put this drive on. And there was the multi-track.
Oh.
And I pressed play.
For John McLaughlin?
It was Billy Cobham's solo album.
Oh, yeah.
And he pressed play, and it was the record. It wasn't like, oh, I remember this. It was done. It was just incredible. All of it was
committed.
Everything, but great. And what you don't realise is, and Ken said this as well, was like, someone said those records, you know, sounded, it's like he corrected someone in a brilliant way by saying they sounded right for the time. Because you listen to the multi-track, they are absolutely full range in a way you don't hear 70s mixes particularly sounding as...
We're so used to vinyl wiping off the bottom end, wiping off the top, and they think that that's the way...
No, these are like, they don't sound old, they don't sound dated, they sound like, can I do that today, please? Because it sounds proper fantastic. Some of them are really dry and dead stylistically, which is more than you would get.
70s,
yeah. But it's great. And people often, I used to think this as well. I'll hold my hand up going, oh, you know, the old records, everyone's in love with them. And they're also thin and small. And maybe they are. Like, you think When the Levee Breaks, it's massive, and you listen to it and it isn't. Yeah. But it is. But
when they mastered it, they wiped off all the low end of Bonham's kick.
And all this kind of stuff. But you listen to the tracking, which I'm so privileged to be able to hear some of this. And I'm going, I didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, Jack Douglas made the same point to me. Yeah. He said he used to get massively disappointed when they get the master back. Yeah. Just because it was mastered for vinyl. So he's on a Pultec, he's taking 60 hertz, he's going whack, the kick's going boom, and it comes back and it's like, boop.
There's so much length and depth on these multi-tracks that the stylistically isn't necessarily what you've heard from the past. And it's like, as someone who does a lot of modern pop mixing, you know, and I'm aware of what big and large modern mixer like. It is all there. It's wild. It's very educational.
Well, I know we're not going to be able to play back. Well, we were listening to Starman earlier, let's be honest, and it was unbelievable. We'll get all kinds of copyright reasons and stuff like that, but let's at least open up the session and show you what little processing. But there's stuff that Ken was telling us about. and you can elaborate on this, is going back into Abbey Road. Obviously, this was originally done at Trident, yes?
Yeah.
But you guys went back into Abbey Road.
Well, I wasn't involved in that part. This was before, but I know what they did. And actually, my friend, I think Anthony, did some of this, and he's fantastic. They rebroadcast elements. This is when I think it was originally might have been done a different way. So they were. I think he just took the opportunity to do this. He rebroadcast into an array. I think we've got it here. So it's U47s, 67s, 47s, 67s, and maybe some C12s.
So a bunch of cheap mics.
Yeah, just a load of stuff, whatever they had lying around. And he did like kind of a basic immersive array around the room. And then...
And this is Studio 2?
Studio 2.
Okay.
And then rebroadcast the elements in that. This is the Morse code from Starman, the thing at the back. And that's been broadcast in, and we've got the immersive array, which actually, I think... this is unusual in that I've actually used it, I think, in the mix. Because all we really used in the end was, here we go. Where is it? Ah, here we go. Brilliant. I didn't know, I've never seen one of these before. And Anthony just popped this.
Is this Cowrack?
No, it's a Core Optimic.
Oh, wow.
It's a little second order ambisonic mic, which you can array and goes nicely into Atmos. But it's these.
These are new, available now?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I got one because it's an interesting
thing.
It's really.
It's like a diving helmet, doesn't it?
But I thought when I saw the picture, I thought it was this massive thing. So this arrived, and I was like, "Oh,
where's the rest of it?"
But wonderful.
Just add water in there, expand.
Exactly. Really wonderful. But that has been fascinating because we listened to the array, and then this is before I've learned a lot more. But there's an amazing professor of applied psychoacoustics called Hyun Cook Lee. He's made an incredible binaural program called Virtuoso, and I cannot recommend this enough. This is the tool. This is so good. It basically lets you put in the input from the renderer.
Yeah.
Or I think the new version is out. Other inputs as well. I don't know how much. I think it's out. And it virtualizes the speakers. So you can sit here and match it to your room.
Yep.
And put in your own HRTF if you want. And then headphones, and it sounds like you're in the room. But it does sound. It's the only thing I've ever put on, and
that works.
And I took the headphones off. I'm really sorry. I thought I was deafening everyone. It was so loud, but it sounded so convincing. And I've started to experiment with at home, doing some mix adjustments on it and bringing them in and seeing how it works. And it's so far good.
Wow.
I haven't done a whole mix from scratch yet, but certainly I can adjust a few things and have a very good test that this is actually good. Excellent. So this guy, Hyun Cook Lee, is actually completely fascinated with immersive mic arrays.
Oh, wow.
And I think he's just bringing some new research into the business about this. But it's very interesting. And some of the stuff he said about the Optimic, which is very interesting, like these coincident arrays are amazing in headphones, and you get some issues with speakers, which is kind of, I don't find it to be an issue. I know what he's talking about, but we did pad that out with Altiverb, I think, around, because as you get closer to the speaker source, the coincident array doesn't work as well as in the mix position.
That makes sense.
But where you are, it's amazing. And so we've used this combination of canopy arrays and the Optimic to make the room feel good. And then Altiverb as well, where we were missing things. Very impressive tech. It enabled us to add space to everything on a very dry record. Super, super dry record. And not sound reverby. It just feels like it's all knitted together in a way. So I think that probably helped with the...
Yeah, on playback, I wasn't sure what to anticipate, because when we interviewed Ken, he talked about, re-outputting the drums in the room and getting the ambience. I wasn't quite sure how that would be, but...
That's the processing on the vocal.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
Which is probably just mirrored what he did on the console. He probably just did some high passing and done.
There's like, I think, what's this? There might be something else. Oh yeah, that's a technical thing. It's not actually passing signal. So I'm just using that to split something. There's a bit of play. That would definitely be Ebony from Acoustica and Lustrous Plate as well.
I do love. I love.
Just brilliant, but for different reasons.
Do you know Matt?
Yeah, I've chatted to him, and he's been so responsive when I was saying, could you get it so you could just turn off the fronts? Because I often don't want to use the front at all. And he went, oh, yeah. And the update comes. And you go, what? This is extremely useful. extremely useful to Audio Matrix for just rematrixing ins and outs in Pro Tools in an instant way, and it's very, very helpful. There's all kinds of stuff, but there's very little. I think this is the only EQ. Ken heard this and liked it. So
Salt,
which is currently in Neve mode. But it has,
I don't know anything about Salt.
Yeah, it's like Neve, SSL, and API, all in one place, and you can drive it or do it. I mean, this is a typical amount of EQ we're doing. It's like
less than 2 dB. 1.5 dB.
Yeah, in the small. I mean, this is a kind of small moves. This multitrack is good. Is really good.
I heard it earlier. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. And Ken did add samples to the kick and snare, which I was shocked when he told me. And then I was.
Can I hear the drums?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this will be copyrighted, but
almost exactly the same thing happening, but
it's completely tuned to the original.
Yeah.
So how many tracks were originally on the drums?
The drums are just left and right.
Oh wow!
No, actually, and that's the original bass drum. Go on, Ken.
Nice.
It's incredible.
So it's a Glyn John setup.
I don't know exactly where he puts them. I think he's quite open about how he records stuff, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. But it's a 3 mic setup.
Yeah, just three. 3
mics on the drums originally.
Yeah. And a tiny bit of accentuation here, and that's it. Not much.
Yeah, not much at all.
But the hats, he added hats. This is not something people really do that much, is to add hats onto the live kit. I mean, sometimes, but they're perfect. I didn't find an error in any and I didn't even notice until I accidentally turned off the hats one time, and then I was like, what's happened? And he's like, oh, I don't know. Oh, the samples, the hats are gone. And they're just slightly unbalanced. It was wild.
That's incredible.
It's absolutely
3
incredible
mics on the original kit is
punchy as hell.
Yeah.
The orchestra's 2 mics. And insane.
Orchestra's 2 mics.
Insane. Absolutely insane. Like, so brilliant. Let me put it in stereo. There you go. Just 2 mics. And he's so nonchalant about it. And I put them up and I'm sitting there going, this sounds
like it was recorded yesterday.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like something that's put through Retrocolor. And, it's just like, you heard the low extension there, right?
Oh, it's insane.
I haven't heard that on the record, but it's wild. And the balance is beautiful and it's so defined and clear. So, there's some serious art going on in this work. It's a great vision and really, I mean, obviously I'm a fan. So it's, it's impressive though. It's a good learning experience. Going.
Unbelievable. I'm just for my own edification. Give us, even though it's not going to be on, just a little bit of solo Bowie.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know if Ken told you, all the vocals are one take.
Yeah, he did say. Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And that's one of the reasons, the motivation for Ken for doing the Atmos mixing was to bring out the vocals from the mix more so people could hear the detail of the vocal a tiny bit more.
I remember reading that at this period, Bowie and the band all lived in the same house.
Yeah, I'm really sketchy on all this stuff. Ken is the thing, I think. Yes, I think there's crossover with Hunky Dory as well that I don't know.
They were done within 2 weeks of each other. Yeah, I think both records took about 2 weeks each.
Yeah, Ken was definitely, the records were 2 weeks, and he says that was just what it was. I had some great conversations with him about record making and people do things. And he's got amazing stories forever about
the string arrangements done by Johnson.
Just insane on the toilet apparently.
Yeah. I'd read that, and the first time I ever met Ken, I cornered him. Just said, "Is it true?" I had heard that on Hunky Dory, Life on Mars, that he had arrived in the morning but was not ready. The orchestra's sitting there ready to go and hadn't finished the arrangement. And he said, yeah, true. And he said, just disappeared up to the bathroom for about 20 minutes, half an hour, came back with all the charts. I mean, you know, if somebody had said, oh, John or Josephine Famous had done this arrangement, we wouldn't even blink.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's the guitar player.
Yeah. It's wild, isn't it?
And just the most, if you've ever heard him interviewed, I'm sure you have, just the most plain-speaking, northern guy, you know, no airs and graces, but obviously, without a doubt, a great musical genius.
Yeah.
How long have you had this room as Immersive?
I was one of the first rooms to come on independently. I think maybe March 21, I think it must have been. So yeah, it's been, what is it, over 3 years of...
And you went straight to the Genelec straight off?
Oh yeah. I had a different setup because I didn't dive into this ridiculous rig straight away. I chatted with Genelec about getting a centre speaker for doing one of the mixes. I think, I can't remember what show it was. It was one of the shows with David Holmes, and he's saying, you know, it might have to be LCR. And I was like, oh, I don't have a centre speaker. I couldn't borrow one of these. I was like, I might need to get a couple. I mean, I just need something accurate that will work, and I knew that this would be a good idea. So I called up my friend at Genelec and said, you know, is it possible I can work out some way of getting a centre speaker because I need it tomorrow because the guy's giving me no notice. And he said, yeah, you ever thought about Atmos? And I was like, absolutely not. Not a chance. No, I'm not interested in surround sound at all. And he said, no, it's much more than that. Let me take you down to Dolby and let me play you some stuff.
What was the first thing you heard? Was it Elton John?
No, it wasn't. No, it was some dance track. But it actually folded to headphones really well. And I was like, hang on, flicking between headphones and speakers going, I'm interested in this for the first time, anything surround, because this folds down really well. It's still the same track. It's not a mess. And so I go, oh my God, so is this possible? So I got really interested then. I was like, wow, if you can get a format that people can hear in headphones and it's good potentially. This was early on. And this wasn't Apple Spatial. This was the Dolby Binaural. And I went, okay, I'm interested. And then we worked out a deal. And so I was like, okay, great, we'll do this. And then I think Genelec wanted to see a small room working because that's very useful for them to have a functioning small room that's mixing, because people say you can't do it in a small room. Well, this is not the case.
But the weirdest thing is, I actually think it would be, for me personally, I think it'd be easier to mix in
I
a small
prefer
room.
mixing Atmos in small room.
It just feels like, I like the immediacy.
Yeah. And it depends on the speakers as well, but these are particularly good for this. And so, and that worked out. And I did my first mix, which was absolutely bloody awful, really terrible, and excruciatingly played it back in Dolby going, oh, this is so bad. This is terrible. Because I tried to do it from multitrack, and it's a big ask to do your first mix and Atmos from multitrack. And I did loads of things wrong. The next one I did from stems, and that was quite okay. And the third one I'd play now and say, yeah, it's good. Because it's not me, it's the technical recreation stuff. That's still, you know, you can do it. It's not like super impossible to achieve at all. It's technically engineering. If you can do it, you just have to have the right attitude to do it. And then that caught the attention of people at Universal, and then they sent me a lot of stuff because I could make it translate. So that's how that worked out. And then that escalated, and more people heard it and did more stuff, and then that exploded into, you know, it's nearly 2,000 mixes by now, I think, something like that.
Incredible. So
that's been really great, and I think hopefully testament to that kind of respecting other people's work as a baseline, and then going creative if you want. Like the Eno mix is a full license. They have no relation to the stereo whatsoever. Not even the same elements. You know, there's really not the same elements in there quite often. There's not the same balance. It's nothing. It's a fully new mix. So that's great, but I don't get to do that with that many things because the artist isn't involved. So no way I'm good. You know, I don't think the guitar works well in space. I'm going to take it out. You know, it's not going to happen. You know. But he could do if they were there, and we could do something else. Let's put something else in. I've got Atmos synths. You know, let's go and make something in spatial. Let's do some. It'd be great, but that's not what happens. You know?
Here's an interesting quandary, because I love everything you're saying, and it sets you apart from a lot of people in this world, as we know, doing this. Although most of the guys and girls I know that are mixing in Immersive properly are really very sensitive to the artist, but what we've been talking about is a lot of the stuff that just gets released that has never gone back through the artist or original producer whatsoever. It feels like sometimes, you know, like people are cashing in just to quickly bang something up.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I suppose that strikes me is when an external mixer has been used, who has taken some liberties, not necessarily negatively, and you only have access to the multi-tracks. And, let's just say, like, Andy Wallace mixed some stuff for me years ago and did an amazing job. But he took, where we would have like stereo, it was like a rock album. So we had left and right heavy guitars. And then we had like a melody line and maybe an alternative like arpeggio dancing around. And on the first chorus, he muted this, muted that, took the second chorus guitar, put it over here, took the first one, put it over there, all of which, was wonderful and worked really, really well. But you're coming now and you've been handed, first of all, are you going to be able to get his stemmed out multitracks through an SSL? If he even had it. Highly unlikely, if he's moved locations several times and doesn't have that. So
it's hard enough to get stems that are the same.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. I know you were talking about the Eno stuff and everything and how you had to come back and match that. I mean, that was,
brutal.
But beautiful with 6 months of time.
Yeah. Oh no, it was brutal. With 6 months of time, it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Definitely. That was really hard.
Incredible learning experience.
Amazing. And then had Rhett Davies come in to hear it all. Who was the guy who was there, and he was fantastic and knew everything in every mix. Brilliant. He did stop at one point and go, just think at 320, there's a synth. I'm not sure I heard it. I was going, he's just had no notes, nothing. And there was a tiny synth behind it. I was going, oh, no, it was there. That's okay. We'll carry on. I was like, wow, you really know the music so well. It was lovely. That's another learning experience as well. It's like a lot of that generation of engineer I've worked with, which is several, John Kelly, who's absolutely fantastic, Rhett and Ken, they know everything on the music, everything. Every single part, they know all of it. And that's not so much the case now, I don't think, with lots of people I've worked with. Because things are more throwaway. They put things in to do a part.
It's the committing, the performance, committing the sound.
It's a different thing.
Created that.
I'm not saying one's better than the other. It's just an observation. There's more investment.
Well, it could be a long 5-hour discussion on one better than the other. I do think it's better in some ways because the artist is there as it's being done, their performance, the sound, they're hearing it, they're not shocked by a mix or a master or whatever when it comes back. And, Ken said this in our interview, that especially when he was working with Billy Cobham, because they were co-produced stuff together, and he said his job was to make sure that everything, sounded amazing going down, that he could have performance conversations, but Billy was all about talking to the musicians on that kind of level. And if he wasn't committing, I can't imagine how those records would sound. They'd have to be committed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm back to doing it more now, actually, weirdly, because of just experiences with recording stuff. 5-6 years later, sometimes some projects can be. I did an Alafakatori record, which is a great experience. But that was from 2015 till last year, something like that.
Wow.
Mixing bits, not obviously not all the time, but there was coming back, it was a 2-year break, something. And Nick, who was masterminding it all, would come back and he'd try all these different things and come back. And we ended up using quite a lot of 2015 mixes, the first one. But I had to record them now. And we've gone through Silicon, tools updates, all kinds of changes. And so now I commit most things. I don't leave too much running live anymore. When I'm done the mix, I tend to commit it. I've learned my lesson. I'm not trying to reload, camel fat, which doesn't exist anymore, which I liked, and
don't even know what that is.
Horrendous to recreate, it does loads of stuff, and I used it on things and I liked it a lot, and trying to recreate it is a nightmare. So I didn't want to, and so I've now commit stuff. I commit loads if I'm doing more pop mixing as well. And also now people want stems for everything. So I tend to just commit. So in a weird way, I'm sort of committing now in a way that you sort of don't have to, but I'd quite like to.
It does make perfect sense, doesn't it? And then a lot of mixers I know, like Reed, for instance, for the longest time, up until very recently, was using his SSL, printing through it, and then mixing from that.
Yeah, yes.
So
I've seen people do this before as well.
And you know, if he had kept it all in motion, like you're saying, always going through the channel and not committing,
You can't.
he now no longer has the SSL, so there's no way he could get it back.
You just can't do it time-wise.
Yeah.
If you're turning over a lot of stuff, it's tricky.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a team, which is a certain level of mixing, which is pretty rarefied to have a full team doing your mixing and you overseeing, which is a big mixer thing. We've talked about this as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you need to be mobile and able to do stuff. And, you know, I'll work on 10 things a day easily sometimes. Not 10 mixes a day. I'll work on 10 things a day easily. And that's, you know, imagine recording. I can't have any outboard running now because it's just, unless I kept it all static, which is a total thing. But even then, I really need to line it up and check tones, and I can't do it. I just need to have everything very mobile. And that's, I think, lots of people, right?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I'd like to be self-indulgent.
Yeah, of course you can.
What else have we got hanging out? We've done Moon Age Daydream. We did Starman. I suppose Suffragette City. Oh, It Ain't Easy. 5 years.
5 years is interesting.
All right, 5 years. It's interesting because this drum sound at the beginning is iconic.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued. So I'm a little teary-eyed.
He's in floods of tears at the end of that. The vocal. Ken said he was absolutely streaming, and that was
I had visuals of him singing it, and I could see it in my mind that he was performing. I could see him. It's interesting. That's all I could see. All I could think of was, God, I wish there was video of this.
Yeah,
I wish there was video of this. I could just imagine. This is the greatest example of the Lou Reed influence for me. I love you. You're beautiful. Yeah. He's like so dialing in, like the record sounds, the original album, like I say, on the vinyl is very 70s.
Yeah.
It reminds you. This just sounds completely timeless because, like you say, it's full range.
full range.
But also because the vocal now has more room to breathe without being overly compressed and forward, which would be the modern approach, you know, where everything's like, oh, you know, like this. But I hear every inflection. That's why right at the beginning, I was like, wow, the vocal.
It's different, isn't it? Because you don't, there's something on Starman that I never noticed, there's an extra trill in the vocal, which I've never noticed before. I mean, it's always, you hear it when you hear it, but it's so clear. I did notice as well that I've perpetuated a tiny lie. There's on this one and this track only. Yeah, I touched the limiter on the loudest bits.
Right.
I remember that it's just a tiny bit because this is really dynamic.
Yeah. And
I just realised that's the only time we did that on the record, and it's like a dB or something because it just had to be brought in a tiny little bit because of the shape of the record. And he's bringing. I just realised that I didn't realise it done anything because this was the first thing we mixed, and this had more processing than anything else because of this drum sound, which she actually used. This is a genius plugin. So I didn't know about it until I started talking to Sound Particles. Very interesting company, really innovative in terms of immersive, really innovative. And this one simulates the effect of air and distance. So it's like a filter, but taking into account temperature, humidity, and everything, you get this very natural sense of distance, which is like getting something in Atmos to really come at you from behind is weird. It should just be fade out from behind, right? But it doesn't work. It doesn't sound right. You're missing the sense of space with
Sound Particles air.
Very cool. And so that, and then we're there's quite a lot of automation in Altiverb to make it work. Much more than I thought I'd have to do to bring it convincingly he wanted it to come from the distance, but not be washed out. It's not meant to be washed out in a big...
Which is all interesting because that's such a Bowie thing of this period where like vocals would fade and reverbs would come out. So it's like a pre-fade send to the reverb, you duck it down and that would come. So to do that with the drums as well. Yeah,
Ken like that. I think the beginning of Starman does that. There's like... I think it's pre-fade sends on the reverbs and on the acoustics. I think the original does, doesn't it? As well? Yeah. So that was immersively done. Yeah.
Thank you ever so much.
Thank you,
really
Warren.
appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming down.
So we'll link down to that video with John Kurlander. We'll also, of course, link to Ziggy in Atmos and a Blu-ray. And there's a blog on it and all kinds of other wonderful things. Oh, and check out, of course, Ken's video that we did with him because he also talks about the record. Thank you.
Pleasure.
So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, goodbye, ciao, sayonara.